Welcome to another Telltale Books video. This time I'm going to talk about today's birthday boy. I'm putting this up on YouTube on November 26th for its premiere. And the birthday boy is Frederik Pohl. Frederik Pohl was born on, of course, November 26th in 1919. He died on September 2nd, 2013. So he lived almost 100 years. And wrote a great deal of fiction. Now, I don't know if I'm going to, at this time, I don't think I'm going to go ahead and start a deep dive on Frederik Pohl and try to read everything that he's ever written. But I did want to do a video talking about him, and I chose one of his best known short stories for this video, just to get him in our mix of videos and talk about someone that I think is a very important science fiction writer. Frederik Pohl was a science fiction fan in the 1930s in the New York area, Brooklyn, I believe. He was friends of Isaac Asimov and a member of the Fictioneers and attended the very first World Science Fiction Convention. Very shortly after, he started his writing career, which he would continue until his death, and he also started an editing career, editing astonishing stories starting in 1940. He continued to have a very distinguished career as an editor, editing the Star Science Fiction series of original science fiction anthologies in the 1950s. In the 1960s, he took over editorship from H.L. Gold of Galaxy and If and Worlds of Tomorrow magazine. In the 1940s, he was writing a lot of science fiction, sometimes under pseudonyms with the purpose of filling up empty pages in the magazines he was editing, but also publishing in other magazines. And his fiction at this time was mostly standard adventure stuff. It wasn't very distinguished. It was pretty simple, pretty basic. Nothing, even among the adventure fiction that was being written at the time, I don't feel it really stood out much. But a change came in the 1950s. A change came over science fiction where it was less focused on what they call the hard sciences of physics, chemistry, math, engineering, and became more focused on the soft sciences, the social sciences, psychology, sociology, anthropology, politics, economics, things like that. And you could argue that science fiction all along has been all about the soft sciences, really, because even the hard science fiction is all about how people are affected by the physics and chemistry. And so it's really more about sociology and psychology than it is about physics and chemistry. But the 1950s took the soft sciences and replaced the physics, chemistry, engineering with thoughts about those soft sciences and how knowledge in those areas might change us and affect us. Knowledge and developments, how social developments can possibly change us in the future. So it was doing the same thing as the hard science fiction, just not specifically about the really nuts and bolts type sciences. And Frederik Pohl became one of the major writers to adapt to this new style in the 1950s. And it's at this time that his writing really took shape and became great. The story which I chose to focus on for this video is from 1954. It's a story that is quite well known, has been anthologized a lot and collected a lot. It's titled The Midas Plague. Some of the sources where you can find the Midas plague. One would be, of course, the original issue of Galaxy Science Fiction. This is interesting because the Midas plague is the cover story, but the cover illustration has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's a beautiful Ed Emshwiller illustration. I really love this illustration, but it just has nothing to do with the Midas plague. Don't know why that decision was made, but it is a really cool illustration. Another place where I have it is in the Del Rey collection from the 1970s, The Best of Frederik Pohl. And I also have this same book as a hardcover, but the paperbacks have cooler illustrations than the hardcover editions do. So I do love these paperbacks. And the Midas plague is in this book. And another place you could find it, and these are all used books. I'm not sure of any current books in print that would have the Midas plague. There might be one, but I'm not positive of that. But this is a first edition from 1983, a St. Martin's Press book of Midas World, which contains the Midas plague and some other stories related. The Firebringer, the Servant of the People, the Man Who Ate the World, the Farmer on the Dole, the Lord of the Skies, and the New Neighbors. And it says Midas World, a novel, but it's really more of a collection of short stories that are all related. And the relating story here and the basic synopsis of the Midas plague is based on the idea, which I don't think anybody would believe anymore, really, but in the 1950s, with growing automation and jobs starting to be lost to automation and machinery, science fiction authors speculated, and this part is still possible, science fiction authors speculated that automation would put most people out of work. And everybody would have to go on welfare and be supported by the government. Now, the second feature of the world that Frederik Pohl describes for the Midas plague is the fact that this automation creates a world of plenty where there's actually more being produced than what people really need. And so when you go on welfare, you're forced to be a consumer. You're actually expected to meet a quota of consumerism. And so you have to, you're given the credits to go out and buy stuff. Whether you need it or not, you have to go out and buy it, and you have to use it, and then you have to go and buy more and keep consuming. So Pohl was kind of speculating off of two things. First, the rise of automation, and second is the development of the consumer economy, where if consumers didn't buy, companies could go out of business, which is still true today. Most of the wealth of our world is dependent on the vast majority of people going out and continuing to buy products so that companies continue to meet profit margins and continue to grow their profits. The only way to keep growing profits, of course, is if consumers keep buying more and keep accelerating their purchasing. And so Frederik Pohl's Midas plague and Midas World may sound a little bit far-fetched, but not too much. It is based on solid thinking about the consumer economy and about an automation economy where most people are put out of work. So that's the Midas plague, is you've got it focuses on one character who is on welfare and forced to consume, and he finds a way to beat the system where he becomes this big hero in the whole society because he's consuming more products faster than anybody else. And well, he does it by cheating the system, and of course he can't let people find out that he's cheating the system. But everybody wants to know how he's doing it because they want everybody to be like him. So there's a little bit of humor to this, but it's also a lot of scary reality about just what our economy is all about and where it could go in the future. This still could develop for us. We still have basically a consumer economy, and we now have a lot of automated systems that could effectively replace workers and put those workers out of work, unemployed. They won't be able to find jobs. Their skills won't be needed because the machines are doing it. So this story was, it was published that was the April 1954 issue of Galaxy Science Fiction, and so 70 years ago, next April, it'll be 70 years old. And it's still relevant to us today. The story itself, from a writing standpoint, is well written. It is, what is it technically? It's technically a novella, so not a novel, but not real short. But still shorter than a novel, so you can't. So he doesn't have the wordage here to deeply build the world and deeply build character, but he does a really good job of making this world believable and thinking through the details of the world and also painting a picture of a person who's being affected by all this and caught in the middle of it. And what does he do about it? How does he solve his problems when he's not keeping up with his expectations as a consumer? How does he solve it and end up becoming the greatest consumer ever? Now that's just the Midas plague. Those other stories in the Midas world examine the whole thing further. So I haven't read all those, but they do take place in the same world, and so they would expand on this world and expand on the details of this society and how it works. I give the Midas plague a top tail. I know I'm doing a lot of these without Emily ever having any clue that I'm even reading these stories, but she just doesn't read enough. She can't keep up with all this, and I want to cover all these great old science fiction stories and get them into our top tail list. And so the Midas plague, happy birthday Frederik Pohl. The Midas plague is one of the greatest science fiction stories and is an excellent story for, I think, even people who are not big science fiction fans. I think it, because of how it relates to our world and relates to our own situation right now, I think people who are not really big science fiction fans could still very much enjoy this story. So I guess I'm saying it's for everyone. I'm sure there would be people who wouldn't like it, but it really is a good all-round story that transcends the genre boundaries. It's not your typical science fiction story, even for the 1950s. So that's the Midas plague. And I will report on other great Frederik Pohl stories. I'm just not certain yet if I want to go back and try to do everything. Especially since some of his earliest stuff, it is just simple 1930s style space opera stuff. It's adventure stuff and not especially great. I've read some of those, and they're fun, but today they feel very outdated. But when you get to the 1950s, things change for Frederik Pohl, and he becomes one of the best authors in the field. So check him out, and comment on this video. Come back and and watch more videos like this video, subscribe to our channel. And I will be here reporting on all the different authors I'm exploring, and I'll work in some other Frederik Pohl here and there. I definitely want to do Gateway. I want to do the Space Merchants, with which Frederik Pohl wrote with C.M. Kornbluth. That'll be coming up, and just so much more. And I'll see you next time.